Wonderful. So Pamela, we'd like to move to you to get some comments from you if we can. And you know, I think that you've had not only a strong history in looking at the board side of reporting, but also the executive side of reporting. And so an interesting question that's out there is, if we are actually increasing the number of women in senior leadership positions, are we not in fact naturally filling the pipeline for board positions? And so you've seen both sides of that, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure, Shannon. So we are seeing women continue to occupy executive officer roles in increasing numbers. According to the Catalyst census of 2013, which is the most recent one, it shows that women hold 18.1% of executive officer positions. So while that's not where we would like to see the figure, it is showing a slow and steady increase. I think what's important, and I think you made a really great point, Shannon, is that it is all about the pipeline. And so when you look at the pipeline to boards, the boards are looking for individuals with the credentials and the experience to bring value to the company. Yet even though only 18.1% of women hold these executive officer positions, I think we would all agree that it's not a supply issue, it's a demand issue. That there are many qualified women across the country and around the world who have not yet been tapped to serve on boards, yet who have the experience and the credentials to add great value. I think too what we're seeing is there are companies that do this very well. The tone at the top, the CEO and the executive team making it clear that diversity is important. We see companies where there are strong programs in place to develop women in leadership roles. And we see companies that have robust human resource policies and procedures in place. And they range, right, from flex time to competency-based performance evaluation. So there are lots of tools that companies can use. So those are the good companies that are doing it well, and as a result they have more women in executive officer roles. Whereas companies who are not doing those things very well do not. And so, you know, these best practices are shared, and through the council we share with member organizations. Really the one word we talked about earlier today was recipe. There is a recipe for producing more women in executive officer roles and in board roles.
Interesting. So I'd like to dig a little bit more into the notion of the aspiration women have to sit on boards. And I'm curious about that supply and demand equation. So is there enough aspiration? Is the aspiration beyond the capacity of the empty board seats? And I guess just, you know, what is the status of qualified board women and their ability to line up to the potential for board seats right now?
So if you look at women in executive roles and men in executive roles, and you look at how many board seats there are, so if we just do the math for a moment. So we have 4,020 board seats on the FP 500, and we know the turnover is between 8 to 10% per year. So to make the math easy, we say there are 400 board seats that turn over each year. And so those board seats, we know from our annual report card research that 80% of those board seats are filled by directors who look at each other across the board table and ask each other who they know within their networks. And while there are many executive women out there who are qualified to sit on boards, unfortunately many of those networks that I've just spoken of do not include those women. And so there's a natural human nature being what it is, there's a natural tendency to appoint like individuals. So the directors tend to recruit men to come onto those boards. We know in 20% of the cases, however, there's a more robust process followed. And it's when that process is followed, where a search firm is retained, where a skills gap analysis is conducted, and it's skills driven, that process tends to bring together a short list of qualified men and women, especially when the search firm is given the mandate to do so by a company that recognizes there's money to be made by way of improved financial performance from diversity of thought. So women are aspiring to be on boards. There aren't enough of them on, and there is a large pool of women who have yet to serve on their first board, and I meet many of them every day through the Women's Executive Network as well as through the Council.
And I've had several women, speak to me as well, and I know they try and aren't successful, and I guess that's why I asked the question: is the aspiration being tapped? And I don't know if...
Well, one way that we are tapping it is through Diversity 50. So that's an initiative that the Canadian Board Diversity Council unveiled in 2012 with the backing of 11 CEOs, including your CEO, Frank Vitis, Shannon. And this is an initiative where we identify 50 men and women, visible minorities and Aboriginal leaders each year who aspire to be on boards. And for our member organizations, our members can look at 78 searchable fields to identify the skills that those individuals have and match them to their board needs. So we've had 23 board appointments thus far from Diversity 50, and so it shows that we are able to connect these aspiring directors who aren't on anybody's radar screen for the most part to boards. It's an easy way for a board to identify new directors.